एंड वेलकम। स्वागत है आप सभी का आवाज एंटरप्रेन्योर पर और ये खास एडिशन में आपके लिए लेकर आ रही हूँ इंडिया फिनटेक फोरम के एनुअल कॉन्क्लेव इफ्टा 2024 से। इस साल इफ्टा में 2000 से ज्यादा स्टार्टअप्स ने भाग लिया। इफ्टा की खास पेशकश फिनटेक ओलंपियाड में 2000 कॉलेजेस के 40,000 स्टूडेंट्स ने पार्टिसिपेट भी किया। इस फोरम में चर्चा हुई फिनटेक में बढ़ती एआई की भूमिका से लेकर 2025 में आने वाले इनोवेशंस, फिनटेक के फ्यूचर और खास तौर से इस क्षेत्र में होने वाले निवेश पर। पिछले साल जब हमारी मुलाकात इफ्टा में हुई थी, चर्चा की शुरुआत इसी मुद्दे पर हुई थी कि क्या भारत में एक फंडिंग विंटर चल रहा है एंड व्हेन डू वी सी दैट एंड, बिकॉज funding in fintech across the ecosystem had dropped substantially. Even now, things haven't changed. From the peak of 21, we're still down to 60%, by 60% rather. And I was just comparing data. So 2021, $8.4 billion, and this is money that came into fintech. But in 23, it was $2 billion. And in 24, since we've got a couple of more days for December to end, so far it's only $3 billion. So not much has changed. Sanjay, let me kick this off with you. What's happening? Why has funding slowed down? पैसे की कमी तो नहीं है, लेकिन क्या choices की कमी है या innovation की कमी है?
Sector-wise, if you look blockchain, it has changed. If you look at crypto, it is different. It has grown. Just taking an example of Bitcoin, it has grown like anything. So asset has changed. So we have to think of fintech not just locally. Let's say Plate network. PLAID, Plane Network.
Yes.
It has grown. Stripe, it has grown. So globally, you have to take the bets, not locally. And when you invest, I have invested in companies like Condisix. It has grown like anything.
Talk about that right opportunity. Are you getting enough opportunities at this point in time, Mr. Chacha? क्या वो है या फिर अभी भी थोड़ा सा ठंडा है? Because that's what we started the discussion with last time. Market थोड़ा गर्म हो रहा है कि नहीं?
I think we are at the end of a sort of a maturing of a cycle. So you're seeing a change of guard in every sector. For every Byju's that stumbles, there is a physics wala or an eruditus. For a Dunzo that stumbles, there is a Zepto. So there's a Darwinian cycle going through, and the larger VCs are waiting with large checkbooks to back the winners who will emerge, right? So we are in the consolidation phase. In the early stage, it's interesting. We are seeing either some people who have not woken up and still trying to create some leaders who have, some ventures which have already become successful and dominant. So those ideas are kind of done and dusted. Or they are experimenting with AI. And I must say that the regulatory environment has not been conducive to fintech creation, right? I'll say it upfront. As a result, there has been a chilling effect as far as new ventures are being created in fintech. Of course, these guardrails are important, but I think we need more clarification as well on an ongoing basis. Right now, the way the regulations they flow, we can understand in their wisdom they are releasing these circulars. But very often they come as a surprise, right? Because sometimes there is no regulation and some founders will go and build a product or a service. And later on we realize that, okay, this may or may not have been in spirit or something. So I think there is no rule book in general. So given how regulated the sector is, I think there needs to be more communication from the regulator in terms of what can be built, what cannot be built. And yes, they are doing outreaches, they are meeting with founders, but I think more needs to happen. Because when we look at various companies, sometimes we are also worried whether this will be regulatory kosher or not. And when you try to explain that to a founder, they say there is no regulation which says that. So that is the third factor that most investors and founders are not talking about. But this is a reality. It is a reality of any maturing ecosystem. We are seeing it in US also. The US Fed is also waking up and bringing about some changes. So globally, we are seeing as the digital money becomes pervasive, the regulators are waking up and saying, okay, we need to address this carefully. So it's across the world spectrum.
What is your assessment, Varun, as to what is happening in the ecosystem at this point in time?
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, the new buzzword since the beginning of this year was fintech is dead. Or at least that was a question being posed very often globally, not just in India, is fintech dead? And some of the numbers also you quoted can point towards that kind of a thing. But what we need to all understand and appreciate in this room is that 2021 and 2020 was in no way a baseline for any form of venture funding anywhere in the world. Right? There's a normalized cycle, part of the cycle. And I think if you compare the numbers right now, it's probably closer to what we saw in 2018-19, and which seems to be a more healthy, sustainable rate, right? So I think the funding has normalized. Funding has become a lot more skewed, wherein in 2021, in fintech particularly, but even in other sectors, you just saw the funnel for venture funding getting super wide. There's a lot of new money flowing in. Suddenly in the middle of COVID, people realized that we can do a deal over Zoom, sitting in different time zones, 15 hours away, and cutting multiple checks across, right? Y Combinator went crazy just deploying money, right? And now they've pulled back on that. Similarly, on the founder side as well, when you see that money being available, there were so many people who kind of took the plunge. Consequently, a lot of funding happened, right? The demand-supply curves have moved up. But if you look at the quality of the funnel, that did not fundamentally change, right? There were parts of it that improved, but not to the quantum of the numbers that we saw in terms of funding. So what we're seeing right now is actually more of a calibration. I mean, who's to say what is normal, what's not? But a calibration that seems closer to normality and closer to what's palatable, where we're seeing a healthy side of, on both sides of the equation, both in terms of funding that's being available, as well as founders who are starting up. Right now, the founder quality is probably at an all-time high. What we're seeing, far fewer deals in the market right now, but it's people who with decades of experience, who deeply thought through problem statements, want to build multi-generational companies, who are really taking the plunge to start off because funding is not that readily available. Money is not that cheap, right? So I think that scarcity in funding actually begets better founding quality and better deal coming out in this vintage. On the funding side, we're seeing some kind of a skew where we're seeing a flight to quality. People are a lot more cautious. People are waiting, taking their time. Nobody is in a hurry to do deals over a weekend. And people actually want to talk about business and how do we build long-lasting companies, which is healthy for the ecosystem.
मेगा क्या इसी तरह की conversations फिर आपकी भी investee companies के साथ हो रही है? Of course, everyone needs to be in for the longer game, but are they addressing and checking all the right tick boxes like the regulator also wants them to?
So I think absolutely yes, right? And one of the things that now founders have also started thinking on, specifically with what is going on in financial services from a regulatory standpoint, is that from the day one when you're designing your systems and you're designing your architecture, how much are you trying to ensure that it's in line with all the requirements that the regulator has? Because what has happened of late, specifically in the last 1 year, is that regulator has become very, very active in the ecosystem. And so has, the responses from the ecosystem. So it's become a situation where you have to, or the founders from day one have to think about ensuring that your systems, your internal architectures are built in such form that they withstand the test which might come through. And at the same time, the traditional financial services institution, which were not adopting to technology as much, are being forced to adopt technology, because a lot of guidelines which are coming in are going to be solved through technology only. So if you want to make your systems far more stronger, you will have to adopt cybersecurity startups, you will have to look at fraud startups, and you will have to adopt those technologies which might not be a priority so far, but now you're being pushed to take it up as a priority, right? So that is something which will enable the growth of fintech in that segment, but at the same time they need to ensure that you have your regulation in place such that you don't fall on the wrong side of it.